Before we dive in, smash that subscribe button if you love unraveling the darkest, most twisted mysteries. And trust me, this one will keep you up tonight. The call came in at 3:12 a.m. A jogger had found someone, lying face down near the old Miller Creek footbridge, a place locals avoided after dark. When officers arrived, their flashlight beams cut through the freezing mist to reveal the body of 17-year-old Tyler Vance, a straight-A student and the son of a well-respected high school counselor. His backpack was missing. His phone was gone. And yet, there were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, no footprints except his own. Detectives initially suspected a fall. The bridge railing was rotted, half-eaten by years of rain and neglect. But there was one detail that didn't fit. Tyler's shoes were spotless. The trail leading to the bridge was mud-soaked from last night's storm. There was no way he'd walked there without getting dirty. Someone had placed him there. Detective Rachel Harlow, a sharp, unflinching investigator known for solving cases others couldn't, crouched beside the body. She noticed something faint on the boy's wrist, a thin, black smear. "Ink. Get forensics to swab this," she said. "Something's off." As Tyler's body was transported, a group of officers canvassed the area. Nothing. No cameras. No witnesses. No recent reports of suspicious activity. It was as if the crime had been committed in a pocket of silence. But word spread fast. By sunrise, the entire town of Briar Ridge was awake, staring at the news in disbelief. Tyler wasn't the type to sneak out. He wasn't involved with drugs, gangs, or anything remotely dangerous. He was planning to apply to Stanford. He was a kid teachers held up as an example. So why was he dead? Detectives went straight to the Vance home. Tyler's mother collapsed when she saw them. His father stared blankly, unable to form words. Only one person seemed strangely composed, Tyler's 16-year-old cousin, Mason. He had been staying with the family for the past few months after what relatives called behavioral issues. Behind his calm eyes, something flickered. Something Detective Harlow didn't like. "Were you with Tyler last night?" she asked. Mason shook his head. "No, we weren't really hanging out." He kept his tone neutral, almost rehearsed. As investigators pieced together Tyler's final movements, they found one surprising thing. At 11:47 p.m., Tyler had sent a single text message to an unknown number. It read, "I'm here." Then nothing. A subpoena to the phone company revealed that the number was registered under a prepaid SIM card purchased 2 towns over. The perfect burner. Meanwhile, forensics uncovered something even stranger. The ink smear on Tyler's wrist wasn't ink at all. It was residue from a specific type of permanent marker used to outline measurements in 3D printing and modeling. A rare brand, sold in only a handful of hobby shops. It was a very specific clue. That caught Detective Harlow's attention. By noon, a new lead emerged. A classmate reported seeing Tyler arguing with someone behind the gym earlier that week. Someone wearing a dark hoodie and carrying a 3D printed mask. Detective Harlow instantly felt a chill. Briar Ridge High had only one student known for obsessively creating 3D printed props, masks, and gear, Mason. She returned to the Vance home. Mason wasn't there. His room was empty, except for something unexpected. Hidden behind his desk, taped beneath the wooden shelf, was Tyler's missing phone. Powered off, wiped clean, but not clean enough. A tiny crack in the case revealed something trapped inside. Dried mud, the same type found at the bridge. Detective Harlow's pulse spiked. Mason had lied. He wasn't not hanging out with Tyler. He had been with him, and he had Tyler's phone. But there was more, much more. As officers prepared to issue a statewide alert for Mason, another call came in. A fisherman had reported seeing a teenager sprinting through the woods near the reservoir, carrying a backpack that looked just like Tyler's. The timing was too perfect, too precise. Detective Harlow sped toward the reservoir with backup trailing behind her. The woods were dense, wet, and silent except for the distant hum of the town waking up. Then, through the trees, she spotted it, a narrow trail of footprints leading toward an abandoned maintenance shed. She approached slowly, gun drawn, listening for movement. The wind rattled the metal siding. A single light flickered inside. She pushed open the door. The room was empty, almost. In the center of the floor lay a thick folder stuffed with printed pages. Maps, screenshots, surveillance notes, detailed timelines, and at the very top, a page labeled Phase TWO. A second victim, a second planned attack, a second target. Detective Harlow froze. Mason wasn't just running. He was escalating. And the target listed for Phase 2? It was someone shockingly close to the investigation, someone who had no idea they were being hunted. Detective Rachel Harlow stood frozen in the doorway of the abandoned shed, the damp air clinging to her skin as she flipped through the folder labeled Phase 2. The handwriting was neat, almost disturbingly controlled. Careful block letters, each line perfectly spaced. It didn't look like the ramblings of a panicked teenager. It looked like the planning notes of someone who had been preparing for this moment for months. Inside the folder were photos printed on cheap paper, but clear enough to recognize a face. A familiar face. The target for Phase 2 wasn't a stranger. It wasn't even someone peripheral to the case. It was Detective Harlow herself. There were images of her leaving the station, buying coffee at her usual spot, talking to neighbors outside her apartment building, notes about her routines, her schedule, even the pattern of lights in her home at night. Someone had been watching her, closely, carefully, and she had never noticed. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. If Mason had planned this much, he wasn't improvising. He was acting out a blueprint he believed he could execute flawlessly. He'd already fooled the department, planted evidence, staged a body, and vanished. For a 16-year-old, it was unthinkable. And yet it was happening. She grabbed the folder and ran out of the shed, shouting for the nearest officer. Within minutes, the woods were swarming with police. Drones went up. Dogs were brought in. But the forest was a maze of wet soil and fallen branches, and every second that passed put Mason further away. Back at the station, the team pored over the materials found in the shed. Each page raised more questions. Why target Tyler first? Why stage his death instead of making it look like an accident? Why target her? Then a breakthrough came from the digital forensics team. The crack in Tyler's phone case hadn't just trapped mud. It held microscopic shavings of PLA plastic, the same type used in budget 3D printers, the same type Mason used. But the phone also had something else, fragment of adhesive from a tracking device. Someone had planted a tracker on Tyler weeks before his death. Someone who wanted to monitor his every move. Detective Harlow stared at the evidence board as the pieces clicked into place. Mason wasn't improvising. He was orchestrating. Tyler hadn't just been the first victim. He had been the first obstacle. She ordered a full background dive into Mason's school life, online activity, and disciplinary records. What surfaced was alarming. Mason had been suspended twice in his old school for threatening behavior, though the details had been sealed after a juvenile counseling agreement. He had been caught writing violent fiction online under anonymous handles. He had posted step-by-step breakdowns of real criminal cases, analyzing every mistake the perpetrators made. And 2 months before Tyler's death, right around when Mason moved in with the Vance family, his private 3D printing forum logs showed increased searches for non-metal weapons, homemade tracking devices, and forensic countermeasures. Detective Harlow reread one of the logs aloud. A perfect crime isn't about avoiding evidence. It's about planting better evidence. Fourth entry down, timestamped 2 weeks before Tyler died. She felt the chill deepen. Meanwhile, officers expanded the perimeter search around the woods. Late in the evening, they found something, a backpack half buried under leaves. Tyler's backpack. Inside were notebooks, a broken phone charger, and a folded piece of paper that didn't belong to Tyler. It was a crude map drawn in pencil, leading to a location several miles away, a long-abandoned farmhouse near the county line. The farmhouse had been the site of an arson investigation 10 years earlier. It had never been rebuilt. It was the kind of place a teenager could hide for days. As night fell, a tactical team assembled. Detective Harlow insisted on going. She was the target. She knew Mason's patterns better than anyone now. When they arrived, the farmhouse looked worse than expected. Charred beams sagged under the weight of time, and vines crawled up the remaining walls. The moonlight cast long shadows across the broken windows. The air smelled like rain-soaked ash. Officers circled the property. No movement. No noise. The front door hung on one hinge. Inside, footprints dusted the soot-covered floors, fresh ones, leading toward the back room. Harlow stepped inside, her flashlight sweeping over debris. A metal cot sat against the wall, a half-eaten protein bar, a flashlight, a stack of printed papers. And in the center of the room, something that made her stop cold. It was a bulletin board, handmade from plywood, covered in photos, strings, sketches, and timelines. A full-blown investigative wall. But not about Tyler. About her. Dates circled. Times box in red. Her patterns mapped like a predator tracking prey. But one paper stood out. Not a map. Not a photo. A handwritten letter. She pulled it down and read, "You're not as smart as they say. None of you are. You're predictable. And predictable people are easy to study, easy to plan for, easy to break. Phase 2 begins tonight." Her stomach dropped. Tonight, meaning now. She turned as one of the officers radioed in, frantic. Something was happening back at her apartment. A neighbor had seen movement inside. A shadow passing by the window. Mason wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He was already making his move. "Everyone back to the city." Harlow shouted, "He's going after my home." As they tore down the dark highway, siren slicing through the night, Detective Harlow could only think one thing. Mason had planned everything. But she still didn't understand why. And the real motive? The real reason Tyler died? The real reason she was targeted? Sirens wailed down Briar Ridge Main Road as Detective Rachel Harlow pushed the accelerator to the floor. Rain hammered the windshield, turning every streetlight into a blur of color. Her apartment building stood at the end of Westridge Avenue, a quiet complex where nothing ever happened. Now it was the epic enter of a manhunt for a teenager who had planned a murder with the precision of a career criminal. Officers reached the building seconds before she did. Some residents were already evacuating, ushered down stairwells as police swept the halls. Harlow sprinted to the third floor, ignoring the tightness in her chest. If Mason was inside, he had chosen the perfect battleground. He knew the layout from studying her. He knew her habits. He knew how she thought. Her front door was ajar. A thin line of light spilled into the dim hallway, and on the door frame, smeared in black marker, was a single word, Phase TWO. Guns drawn, the officers entered first. The living room was ransacked, couch cushions cut open, drawers overturned, framed photos smashed. But there was no sign of Mason, no footsteps, no movement. Then a soft click echoed from the kitchen. The officers whipped around, lights aimed. A small device was taped under the dining table. A phone, and it had just been remotely activated. A pre-recorded voice began to play, Mason's voice. "Calm, cold, mocking. You made it just in time. I knew you would. You're predictable, Rachel. You love the chase more than the catch." Harlow scanned the room, adrenaline burning through every nerve. The message continued. "By now, you figured out part 1. How Tyler got in the way. How he wasn't supposed to see the meeting behind the gym. How he wasn't supposed to hear the conversation." The officers exchanged troubled glances. Conversation. Harlow whispered, "With who?" The recording answered, "He heard me talking to my father." Harlow froze. Mason's father. There had been almost no information about him in the family's records. The Vances always avoided questions. He'd been away, unreachable, not in the picture. But the truth was much darker. "I know the police records say he disappeared after the arson case." Mason's voice went on. "But he didn't disappear. Not the way you think." Suddenly, an officer shouted from the hallway, "Detective, you need to see this." Harlow rushed out to find a trail of photos taped to the wall, photos taken in secret. She picked one up. It showed a man in his late 40s, eyes cold, face scarred from an old burn injury. Another photo showed the same man meeting with someone in an alley, and that someone was Mason. A third photo, Tyler in the background, watching, shocked. Tyler wasn't supposed to be there. The recording said from the kitchen, "I told him to stay out of it. But he followed me. He followed us. And when he threatened to tell, we had no choice." We, not I, we. The building shook as those 3 letters settled into everyone's mind. Before Harlow could process the implications, another officer yelled from the stairwell, "Movement on the roof." She ran up the final flight of stairs, heart pounding like a war drum. Rain whipped across the rooftop as she burst through the metal access door. The wind howled. The city lights flickered far below. And there, standing on the edge of the roof with a hood pulled low, was Mason. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply watched her approach. "You really are fast," he said with a faint smirk. "Faster than my dad thought you'd be." "Where is he, Mason?" Harlow demanded. "Where is your father?" He tilted his head, rain dripping from his hair. "Closer than you think." Something shifted behind the ventilation shaft. Harlow spun. Too late. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a man with burn scars that matched the photos. Mason's father. The officers on the roof raised their weapons, but the man held up a detonator. A dead man switch. One release, and the entire building would go up. "Drop the weapons," he growled. The officers obeyed. Slowly. Terrified. Harlow tried to steady her breathing. "You killed Tyler because he saw you meeting your son." The man gave a sharp nod. "He wasn't supposed to be there. And neither were you." "And what about me?" she asked, stalling, inching closer. "Why target me?" Mason answered for him. "Because you destroyed his case. 10 years ago, you testified that the arson was intentional. You put him away. You ruined our family. And when he got out, we planned everything. Together. A decade-old case. An arson. A bitter man. A vengeful son raised on resentment and conspiracy." Suddenly, it all made sense. But in that moment of clarity, Mason made a mistake he never anticipated. He stepped too close to his father. Close enough that Harlow saw the tremble in the man's injured hand. She acted on instinct. She lunged forward, knocking Mason aside and slamming her shoulder into the father. The detonator skidded across the rooftop. Officers dove for it. Mason screamed as his father fought, but with overwhelming force, the officers brought him to the ground. Mason tried to run, but Harlow tackled him before he reached the ledge. Rain soaked them both as she snapped handcuffs around his wrists. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," he hissed through clenched teeth. "It never does," she replied. Within minutes, both father and son were in custody. The detonator was secured. The building was evacuated. The nightmare was finally over. But as Mason was escorted into the police car, he turned to her with a chilling smile. "You stopped Phase 2, he said. "Phase 3 is already out there." The door slammed shut, and for the first time in her career, Detective Harlow felt real fear.